Like many wargamers out there, I have some of a controversial conflictual relationship with the game Risk. And not because of Risk itself. It is a decent game, it is a war-themed game that sometimes lasts a little too long, but other than that, there is nothing particularly wrong with it. I have a problem with Risk because of what people have done with it in countless conversations that they've had. Because as soon as I tell somebody that I like to play war games and the person is not very familiar with war games or modern board gaming, they say, oh, you mean like Risk? No, I don't mean like Risk, because Risk is a light war-themed game that sometimes lasts a little too long, but is not a war game because it does not attempt to simulate a conflict, it does not have a commitment to realism, and of course even you may even have non-historical war games that still are structured behind the idea of like, what if this happened, and then the mechanics are tailored to the theme, whether historically or not. But there is a tailoring of mechanics to theme that is more complex, is more sophisticated than you have in Risk. So this idea that every time I say I play war games, I get the, oh, you mean Risk, and then I have to give a little speech in which I know that I'm gonna sound preachy, I'm gonna sound annoying. I think after so many times I give the little speech that I got a little bit better, that I try not to sound like I'm correcting or lecturing the person. That's what I think, and now my speech has become friendly and as entertaining as it is enlightening, but then I don't give out evaluation forms because that may break the illusion. But I think I'm digressing a little bit from my intent, which is to review Risk Europe. Yes, I have a controversial relationship with Risk because what many of you did to me mentioning Risk when I said I play war games, but still from time to time I can bring myself to play a Risk game. And a couple of days ago I saw on Amazon that there was this new version of Risk that I never heard about, that was on sale. It was sort of like special offer, discounted price, whatever, and I decided to give it a try, especially when I saw, ooh, look at this, it has all of this extra stuff. It has advanced rules, enhanced combat, and elite army units. Also seem to be card driven, so I thought, ooh, this seems interesting. So whatever, I pushed myself past my conflictual, emotional tangle that I have towards Risk, and I decided to give a try to Risk Europe, which I'm going to describe in this review. We're gonna talk about the game in general, how the game works, and then I'm gonna share some opinions and ideas about the game with you in the conclusions of this video. The board is a mounted one. It is a mounted board showing a simplified map of medieval Europe. It is nice looking, very readable. As you can see, it also has a nice color palette. Some areas on the board are empty. Some other ones represent regular cities, and some golden cities, or in any case special cities that have special effects that we will discuss in a minute. Overall, in any case, very good map. The game contains a healthy bunch of plastic miniatures representing the armies that will take a part in the fight represented in the game. So you have 4 armies made of plastic miniatures, and each army is divided in 4 groups: infantry, archers, cavalry, and siege engines. Now, to distinguish the armies from one another, they could have used the same miniature with the same shape, the same molds, same pre-printed in 4 different colors, but actually they gave for each type of unit in each army a different look. They gave a different look to each type of unit, so the game is much more pleasant that way. For example, as you can see, these are the infantry units from the 4 armies, and as you can see, they look very different from one another. Different range units, archers, they're all called archers, but not all of them really have bows and arches. This guy has a crossbow, for example. These guys kind of look like one another, but they're not identical. Different types of cavalry. Again, these units here, these miniatures, are functionally all the same. These are four cavalry units, and they all work the same, but it's nice to have them in different to have them with a different look. And then the siege engines. Oh, these are really neat. You have to, they're usually made in 2 separate pieces. You have to assemble them, but they're really nice looking. And this is the most rudimentary siege engine that we have in the game. Is just 3 guys ramming, well, getting ready to ram the walls of the opponent. And here we have a nice pew, well, this way, pew, a nice catapult. Yes, it doesn't work, but it looks like it could, which is neat. Nice production here when it comes to the miniatures. The game is card-driven. Each player has a deck of cards. Well, one card is not really used during gameplay. It is a player aid with a side indicating the cost of the units that you may purchase, and on the other side a reminder of how combat works. Then each player has a deck of 8 cards which are used during gameplay. The game is divided in rounds. At the beginning of the game, you choose 2 cards from your set of 8, so you commit to those 2 cards, say these 2 ones, and you put them face down in your play area. Then each player will choose one of their 2 cards, play it, and perform one of the 2 actions indicated there. Then each player will play the other card. From there, we could call it mini hand of 2 cards. Then they choose the 2 cards from their hand, from their deck, form another mini hand or 2, and repeat. So pretty much you're committing to the next 2 actions. I like that that alternating between choice in a range of options, which is nice at the beginning and then shrinks rapidly. And after you chose what to do, then you're stuck with the other card that you committed to. Really nice idea here. I like the fact that we're talking about the Middle Ages. Communications are complicated. You shouldn't be able to react too quickly to what the opponents are doing. Very often you should be stuck doing something that is not very profitable because things turn out to be not what you expected. And this very simple system of mini hands of 2 cards simulates that quite well. Component-wise, these cards are pretty flimsy, which is a little disappointing when you look at the quality of the other components, but then most players will sleeve their cards, so that's not going to be a problem for you. Crowns that you put on the cities when you take control of them, not strictly necessary, but cute to have. Castles that each player takes 1 at the beginning of the game, and then you can build more during gameplay. They are quite formidable constructions that give you huge advantages during gameplay. We got dice, and component-wise, I think that's most of what we have. Of course, as soon as I say that, I look around and I see, no, we got many more components. We got coins that I use to purchase stuff. We got crown cards. They can be purchased during gameplay, and each card that you purchase counts as a city that you control. You win the game by taking control of 7 cities, but that can be a mix of cities that you actually control and crown cards that you acquired, and Rome always counts as 2 crowns. And then we have the first player token, which is this nice doubloon or whatever coin this is. Now, we already talked about the basic engine of the game. That is, the game is played in rounds. You choose 2 cards from your set of 2. You commit to those 2 actions. Each player resolves a card, choosing one of the 2 actions. Then each player resolves the other one, and you repeat. And then once you have spent all of your cards, after 4 rounds, you take them all back and you repeat the procedure. So you kind of get a sense of what the opponents may still have in their deck based on what they played. So really the game is about resolving these actions with the armies that you have on the board. Now, these actions, how do they work? We have the expand order, which can be expanded into 1 territory, or split expand into 2 territories. It simply means that you move units from a territory in which you are to an adjacent territory, or 2 if you're using the split expand. And you may expand into empty territories or territories that include enemy units, as long as you leave at least one unit behind in the territory from which you're moving. And as you can imagine, if you move into territories that have enemy units, a combat will follow. That's for expand and split expand. Maneuver, you move through your supply lines, which simply means you move through lands, through regions that you already control. If this is the situation, suppose, then a maneuver would allow me to move from one unit, from one area that I control, to move units to another area that I control, only moving through regions that I already control, up to 3 regions. So I can move up to 3 regions away. Taxing. Taxing allows me to collect coins from all the cities that I control. The number is indicated by the city that I control. And spend. The action of spending allows me to purchase new things using this display right here. A single infantry costs 1 coin, an archer 2, cavalry 3, a siege weapon 10, these yellow coins are like 5 regular coins, a castle 12, a crown card 10. And the crown card is of no use during the game, but again it allows me to score points that I need to win the game. These are pretty much the basic actions. And of course there is combat, which is a function of movement, is a consequence of movement. But for the main actions, it's pretty basic. You can tax, spend, or move, and there are different types of movement within your territory or outside of your territory. These are the actions really. As you may have noticed, there are actually some extra actions here that give you some extra bonuses. For example, allow you to add footmen to a city or castle and things like that. Another thing actually, also you have this other special action here which allows you to take the first player marker. Something important also is that when you take control of cities that have that circle around them, those are special cities, they all have a tile of this kind. For example, here we have the one for Berlin. It's simply a special power, special ability that gets under the control of the player that controls that city. So the first player that takes control of Berlin will take this tile from the supply, and then if somebody takes control of Berlin from that player, they also take the tile because this is the power associated with Berlin, as you can see. Here we have the power. Castles cost 3 fewer coins to build. Constantinople gives you different things. Rome, nothing immediately, but it's worth 2 crowns, that is 2 points. London allows you to get extra archers for free. Madrid, extra footmen. Interesting stuff, interesting unique powers that can be triggered and exploited when you take control of special cities. Now, combat. Combat is a function, a result, a consequence of movements, and combat is resolved in order. There's a nice tactical feel in the fact that the units do not all activate at the same time. First, the siege weapons attack, then the archers attack, then the cavalry attack, and then all units attack. And within each rank, the units of that rank attack simultaneously. So if I have a green archer and a blue archer, those two will attack together when you get to the archers phase, and then the cavalry will attack after that. And again, if there are multiple cavalry units from both sides, then all cavalry of that group in that battle will attack together. For each unit of the rank that you're resolving, you simply roll a die and inflict a hit on the opponent if you roll the target number or more. So archers hit on a 5 or a 6, which is not great odds, but they do go early in the turn. Cavalry hits almost always 3 or more, so they're pretty devastating. They all roll 1 die per unit, but they attack after the archers, but still before the footmen. In truth, not just before the footmen, but before everybody else. The footmen just join the fight. If it gets to a point where after applying hits from archers and cavalry, somebody's still alive, then the remaining units get into the scram melee, and then you simply roll dice for all units. You roll, however, so you count all the units that you still have there, including the footmen, and you roll up to 3 dice for the attacker and up to 2 for the defender. Then you roll the dice for the two sides, and you compare the results. Pretty much the highest result inflicts a hit on the opponent. In this case, 6 is higher than 2, and then you compare again the highest with the highest of the two sides. In this case, this side inflicts 2 hits on the opponent because of how the majority works. It is, you compare individual dice against individual dice, and again, each of these duels between dice that is won by a side inflicts a hit on the opponent. You remove all units that have been hit through each rank, and then you repeat the procedure and you go through it with all the units that are left each time that you run through the procedure until one of the two sides is completely eliminated and all the units of one side remain there. This is the basic idea. You continue like this, expanding, moving, adding new things, buying new units, destroying units of the opponent until a player has collected 7 crowns, and the player is then crowned Emperor of Europe, King of Europe, whatever it is, the title that the medieval conqueror would have earned. For certain, the first player to get 7 crowns between cities and crown cards is the winner of the game, is crowned winner of Risk Europe. Speaking as a board gamer rather than a war gamer, I'll tell you, this is a good game. This is a game that is pretty solid. I like the map that is claustrophobic and gives the players this sense of freedom and omnipotence at the beginning as they expand from the initial kingdoms and grab some cities, and they feel very powerful, and then before long, of course, they start clashing against each other, and the map feels nicely, pleasantly claustrophobic, because that encourages people, of course, to go against each other, to make alliances, to decide to force them to take side. You have all of the traditional elements that you have in war-themed games. Also the traditional elements that you have in war games, but we'll talk about that aspect later. So the mechanics of the game are strong. I like the card-driven element. I like the challenges that selecting mini hands of 2 cards gives to the players. The range of effects that you have is simple but effective because you still have to time the effects that you want to use well. You may tax early, and then later you grab control over the cities. You're like, I wish I taxed. I waited to tax. Now I collect more revenue. But at the same time, maybe you're waiting to tax, and the opponent takes a city from you. Now then, your tax action is even less useful than it was 2 rounds ago. So there are a lot of interesting decisions that come from this card-driven element, and I really like this. Card-driven war games have been very successful among war gamers in the last 15-20 years at least, and it's nice to see that element here. I think it works very well with the theme, especially with the medieval theme, as I mentioned earlier, because of lack of communications, how difficult it is to coordinate things. Recently I played a war game, like a full-scale war game, Won by the Sword, that also is talking about, well, that is about the early modern, it's about the 30 Years' War. It also is a card-driven game where sometimes you're stuck with cards that you do not get to select. Here you get to select 2, but then the second one you're stuck with whether you like it or not. In that the game, from time to time you need to draw cards and simply resolve the card that you drew, whatever it is, whether you like it or not. So I like this idea of limited knowledge, limited coordination capabilities simulated by a limited control that you have over a deck of cards. I think it works well in that game, Won by the Sword, which I totally recommend to serious war gamers or people that want to make the step from Risk Europe to an actual war game. And it also works well here in Risk Europe. You have a bit of that epic aspect of the large conquest of the theme. The thing brings to the table. But again, of course, everything is very simple, everything is very linear, which is both one of the best things about this game, and of course one of the things that will bring war gamers to kind of like be snobby about this game and not want to try it, or they try to say, oh, this is not good enough, it's not detailed enough. And yes, there are things in the theme that if you know about the historical counterparts, or you know about some basic conventions of wargaming or warfare, some things do not seem entirely right. For example, when the melee all of the units that are in there count exactly the same. That means that when the melee start close combat, heavily armored infantrymen would be just as effective as archers, as people armed with a crossbow. That doesn't make much sense historically. There are simplifications. It is a war-themed game, but if nothing else, I think goes it's something that goes to credit of the game, something that is a positive aspect that at least it seems almost convincing enough that you start thinking about it as a war game, and from time to time you realize, oh no, it's really not. You wake up and you're reminded this is a war-themed game. But war games out there, as long as you can suspend your disbelief for a while and you can think of this as not as a strictly historical war game, but as a war-themed game with its own set of challenges, with its own set of parameters. I am almost going to say something as heretic as you can think of this as a Euro game of civilization and conquest and building resources, where occasionally you can reduce the resources of the opponent. You think of this as a Euro game with a war theme, rather than as a weak war game that has no respect for historical subtleties. This is an enjoyable game. Per se, this is an enjoyable game. I think it's a very fine game. It's a fine production. The components are all very good, with the exception of the cards that they could have been done better. But Risk Europe is a perfectly fine game itself. For gamers out there, don't be too snobby, give it a try, or don't, but whether you do it or not, do not, I think it would be a mistake to judge Risk Europe using the same parameters that we use to understand and evaluate war games. It is not a war game, although the misunderstanding would be understandable because of the theme. It is a game that is about developing, it's about dealing with a challenging hand of cards. It is about diplomacy. That aspect is very important to make the game interesting. So it has a lot of nice angles, a lot of nice aspects to it. I like it. I personally enjoy it. I think it is a fine implementation of the race system, which was never meant to be very realistic and detailed to start with. This game follows that tradition, but it does so with a couple of interesting ideas that make playing Risk Europe definitely a pleasant experience, unless you're a war gamer and you want to be annoying about historical detail.